So I wanted, morning and great to be with you both. So I wanted to talk a bit today about how to create harmony, to try to create harmony in our interactions with other people, and the different approaches we can use to increase that harmony between ourselves and others. So this is relevant. Of course, there's many levels of harmony. There's even like being at harmony inside ourselves, right? Like there can be harmony. You would say would be the opposite of disharmony, and disharmony or discord. And it's an interesting term, right? Because it's a musical term.
Harmony and discord, both
And
of them.
discord and disharmony, and um, so the idea with again, I'm not a musical expert, but the idea with melody is that that's like the main tune that plays through a song. But the idea with harmony is it's a secondary tune that ideally that may be quite distinct from the first, but still complements it and enriches both of them. And so it's something that can happen when two people are singing together. But for example, two different octaves, for example, and so the voices are a deeper voice and a higher voice that are singing together, but they're complementing each other and they're adding some richness to the sound. So but for there to be harmony, in music there normally needs to be similar tempo and similar key and so forth. So the analogy is about the way in which things can work together in a way that enhances both or can work against each other. So there can be disharmony inside ourselves in different ways. One way, though, is where our conscious intention is to do one thing, but then we feel compulsively driven to do something else. And we find it hard to help ourselves. So that's a kind of disharmony, right? Because part of our mind thinks, I definitely should not say this, for example. And then another part of our mind says, oh, you've got to say it, right? So there's a bit of disharmony between those two parts of your mind. And one of those parts of the mind typically, so when you have a battle like that, and perhaps this is a great oversimplification, but typically there's just, and our mind changes a lot, but typically there's just two voices, right? There's the conscious voice, like this seems like a good idea. There's this sort of rational voice. This seems like a good idea, or this seems like a bad idea, where you can kind of think it through. But then there's a stronger, deeper, and more compulsive voice, like I just can't help myself but do this. I can't help myself but say this. And that is coming from deeper inside of ourselves, very instinctive feeling, this sort of deep desires, and typically the desire, like these desires are rooted in our feelings, right? And so your feelings are of three types: positive, negative, and neutral, right? So neutral feelings don't tend to drive a whole lot of passion, right? But strong positive feelings and strong negative feelings, they drive a lot of passion, right? So strong positive feeling will drive us wanting to get something and feeling it's irresistible. A strong negative feeling will drive us to want to just get rid of someone or something, or say words that will stop them in their tracks and make them go away, right? So we can have this sort of inner battle even within ourselves. But of course, then we have disharmony in couples or families or small groups or large groups. So disharmony arises naturally when we find it difficult to work together, for example, and lots of different aspects, just finding it difficult, but principally finding it difficult to accept that other person, where something that they're doing really stirs some deep positive or negative. Well, no, when something that they're doing stirs some deep negative feelings inside of us, that's typically when when we feel disharmony and conflict in a group. So what we can do is just reflect internally in meditation on the different voices and points of view that are present even in our own mind. And then I'll discuss a little bit more about how to create harmony in our interactions with others. So as usual, we can find a comfortable position and take a deep breath in and out. And just allowing our body then to relax. And then another breath, and just inviting ourselves, asking ourselves, what is important right now? So as we breathe in and out, we can build some appreciation for our body, where it naturally finds its way back towards balance. If our body gets too hot, it sweats. Gets too cold, it shivers, or we look for clothing, more clothing to keep us warm. Our body regulates our blood sugar, our blood salinity, our temperature, the acidity in our blood. Our muscles balance conserving energy with building strength. We balance storing energy with releasing energy. And so the body has amazing abilities to keep itself in balance. Even our ability to sit up straight, to stand, requires a constant fine-tuned adjustments, tiny, tiny motions. And with each breath, that's another form of balance. So we can spend a bit of time just appreciating our body, appreciating our breathing, and how it keeps this life sustained through delicately balancing all of these different factors. So where there are two competing forces, our mind naturally tends towards extremes. Naturally tend towards thinking we need this way or that way. But often what is needed is a balance. Often there's a benefit to high increasing blood sugar. There's a benefit to reducing blood sugar. We need to find a point of balance. Our body needs to find a point of balance. Similarly, in our conscious life, there's a benefit to working hard. There's a benefit to resting, relaxing. There's a benefit to having quiet time to ourselves. There's a benefit to socializing. So we can let each breath remind us of the importance of balance, not going to either extreme. The motion, the dynamic motion of our breathing allows us to continually move around this balanced center point. And we can think of the many times in our life when we've had conflicts inside of ourself, strong wishes that we found it difficult or impossible to control. Times when our conscious mind was telling us not to do something and we deeply wanted to do it. Times when our conscious mind was telling us to do something and our body viscerally, deeply did not want to do it. We recognize that these internal conflicts are natural. So, for example, we want more free time, but we also don't want to say no to activities and opportunities. Sometimes even consciously, our mind can be conflicted and have contradictory wishes. We want to eat delicious food, but we also want to be thin and healthy. We want to be strong and fit, but we also don't want to exercise if we don't have to. We want to read more, but we don't want to take away from the time we spend doing other activities. Even our own mind is full of conflicts, contradictions, and we are constantly balancing these and trying to unify these conflicting, contradictory wishes. But the one abiding wish that we hold in our heart is the wish to be happy and the wish to be free from suffering. And so this wish takes thousands, millions, billions of different forms, but fundamentally it is just one wish, the wish to be happy, the wish to be free from suffering. And what are the minds of others like? They are exactly like our own. They too wish to be happy, wish to be free from suffering. They too have different motivations that are often at odds with one another. And the actions that they do take, the things that they say, arise from this very complex balancing process that they do internally. Everything that others do, they do because they feel like that is the right thing to do at that time. It may or may not be a wise action. It may or may not actually lead them to be happier. But that is always what we're trying to do. That is always what everyone is trying to do. And from this point of view, we can think there is not even the slightest difference between myself and any other living being. We all wish for happiness. We all wish to be free from suffering. And we all have an incredibly diverse array of feelings, ideas, wishes, knowledge, experience. Almost immeasurable, almost infinite, even the experiences of one being. Even within our own experience, there's infinite basis for us to find similarities and commonalities with others. Especially around this core wish, this heart wish to be happy, to be free from suffering. We can think that every time we notice something in our own mind, this is teaching us not just about ourselves, it's teaching us about others. Every time we develop a negative or harmful wish, we can recognize that the same happens for others. Sometimes we act on it, sometimes we don't. The same is true for them. We all struggle with successes or failures in interacting harmoniously, smoothly with one another. And then we can make a decision to, just as we regard ourselves as precious, our own wishes as precious, we need to regard the others as precious. We need to regard their happiness and suffering as precious and valuable. And then with this motivation, we can develop an intention to use this time well, to deepen our own wisdom, deepen our own good heart, and our own peace of mind. And then we can open our eyes and rise from our meditation. So there's a powerful simplification of the spiritual path into one practice, and that is a practice known as cherishing others. Um, can you not hear me?
I cut out practice.
Of cherishing others.
Practice cherishing.
The practice of cherishing others.
Okay.
So this word cherishing means to regard something as precious or valuable, right? A cherished friend, a cherished pet, a cherished possession, right? So a cherished possession. so if we have something that we regard as particularly precious, right? Um, it may just have some sentimental value for us, but we infuse a sense of value um, in that object. Um, so my dad had a little brass bowl that he used to put his keys and and coins and so forth into at the end of each day. He still has it. And I remember as a little child seeing that and thinking it looked like a begging bowl, um, like this begging bowl that Buddha was carrying and so forth. And so I always used to um, think of that as like this very, very special little bowl. And so to this day, I have this deep association whenever I see the bowl. It has this deep association that it has this deep, rich, sentimental value for me. Um, and but it doesn't have much ordinary value. But I cherish it, right? And I invest some value in it. So the I mean, I've mentioned before, but the stock market as it is today is characterized by enormous volatility, right? It's oriented towards short-term trading, and the volatility in the stock market is people, trading, pushing things up, pushing things down. There's a theoretical foundation to the stock market, which is that theoretically, the value of a stock represents the long-term value of that company, but these days, it's really just driven by people's whims and um, automated things. And so for Bitcoin or cryptocurrencies are another great example. They don't have any intrinsic value, but neither does gold. Gold doesn't have any intrinsic value. It's just a metal, but we invest it with value. So the same with little rocks that are, some of them are jewels. What's the difference? They're all just little rocks, right? We like shiny objects, and some of them, we consider to have more value than others. But it is created by the mind. Value is created by the mind. The most precious, the most precious substance in the world. Typically, people talk about like gold and platinum and so forth, but there are some metals and so forth that are even more rare, palladium and then some of these things that are produced only by physicists, and just takes very, very rare. But the most valuable thing in the world, from the point of view of each person's perspective, is themselves. And that's what we call cherishing ourselves. And that is instinctive. It's natural. All of the other things that we consider to be valuable, we naturally want them. We want valuable things in our life, like we want money and so forth, simply because we value ourselves. And we think that this will make us feel better. And in particular, we value our own happiness and suffering. So we cherish ourselves. And so we think my happiness is important. My suffering is important. I need to do anything I can to have happiness, anything I can to overcome suffering. So this cherishing of ourself is instinctive. And what that also means is that we cherish our own ideas. So we cherish our own body. If somebody else gets a scratch or a cut, it's like, oh, I'm so sorry about that. Things happen. If we get a scratch or a cut, we're like, oh no, and it's a bigger deal for us. But our own opinions, we also cherish our own opinions extremely highly. Now, the interesting thing is that we learn things all the time. And when we're learning, we're taking on a new idea. But as soon as we take on that new idea, like I've got some idea about cryptocurrency, I know what it is. I know it's a good thing or a bad thing. And I've got my opinion about that. But as soon as I take on the idea and as soon as I adopt that opinion, we hold it very strongly and we cherish our opinion. And so if somebody else tries to contradict that opinion, it causes us displeasure. It causes us discomfort because it creates some disharmony, like they're saying something that is the opposite of our point of view and cause a little tinge of pain or discomfort, and we get upset. I was watching a video recently on one of the co-founders of Pixar, who founded Pixar, and then skipping to the end of the story, he eventually left it and went off and runs a meditation center now. But I was interested in his story, and he said Pixar, they had a saying, "Check your ego at the door," and he had a beautiful way of describing this. So he'd say, "Okay, we go to a meeting." And the idea is everybody checks their ego at the door. So he gets to the door, he takes out his ego, he puts it outside the door, he goes through the door, he closes the door, he boards up the door, puts all these planks and so forth, and he puts a steel panel and welds that across the door. And then he goes into the meeting completely free from ego. And the meeting proceeds, but then the moment someone says anything remotely critical of us, the ego just bursts through the door, bursts through the wood and the steel panels, and comes right back and is just as strong as it ever was, right? So it's very hard for us to keep this ego at bay. It has a natural tendency to want to come back and want to show itself. And so the ego is really just our sense of I, right? Our sense of who we are. But it is what happens, we get a sense of who we are, but then we cherish that person. We think, I am supremely important. We invest value in ourselves. So the opposite of that is cherishing others. The opposite of that is developing some sense that others are important. And we are, in effect, investing in others and considering their happiness to be important, their freedom to be important, as opposed to just ours. So if you consider others' happiness to be important, then what that means is we naturally tend to avoid, disturbing them, making them unhappy. If we consider their suffering to be important, we naturally don't want them to suffer. And so these minds of wishing others to be happy is called love. Wishing others to be free from suffering is called compassion. The mind that can relate to others' happiness or suffering is called empathy. But the point is, there's something more than just knowing. There's something more than just, so empathy means we develop a similar feeling. We develop basically the same feeling that others are having. We can sort of feel inside of them. But cherishing others really means that we consider that to be important. And so that sense, how important are others? How important is the suffering of others? Is something that we can actually practice. It's something that we can actually train in, and it's something that we can change. It is a mind that we can cultivate. And one way to cultivate it is just thinking these people are valuable. They're precious. Just the same way that you would invest preciousness in a gem or precious metal, some sense of that. We just think these people are precious, right? These animals are precious, whoever you're with. And this is something you can do at all times, no matter who you're with. You can think, even like a mantra, you can just think this person's important, their happiness is important. And what that does is it helps us to be a bit patient to actually listen to them, and to hear their point of view. And it's not to say that every point of view is skillful or helpful, but often we do need a balance, right? Often other people who disagree with us or have a different point of view, sometimes they actually have, I shudder to say this, a good point, right? Some good point. Like there's some core nugget of truth in what they're saying. And perhaps it's the case that there needs to be some balance, right? Like we're right and they're right. Sometimes we need this, sometimes we need that. It's true, right? And so whereas just like our mind naturally tends towards extremes. But what happens if you're walking and you tend towards extremes? You fall over, right? This way or that way. When you're walking, you keep this very dynamic balance, right? And the balance is created partly through different points of view, but it's also important to understand that sometimes we do need. That's not to say. So if you're able to listen to someone, if you're able to discern, maybe they do have some underlying point, maybe there is some good reasonable point, maybe I'm wrong, right? Honestly, that's extraordinarily challenging mind to open up to. That's a doubt. A doubt is an uncertainty. If you doubt your own opinion, maybe I'm wrong. That's an amazing mind, right? That's actually one of the most precious minds. Not saying we should live in doubt, but I'm saying we should be open to questioning our own opinion, open to having some of that doubt, listening to others, maybe being willing to change our point of view, think through things. But that's not to say, and so if we do this, we can have harmonious conversations with others. We can have harmonious interactions. We can listen. We can share ideas. We can agree to disagree, but we can do so peacefully. But that's not to say that the correct answer is the sort of average of everybody's points of view, right? Because there are some deep beliefs that we hold instinctively and that are not necessarily right or helpful. And so there are some deep beliefs that others hold that are not necessarily helpful or correct. And so while we do need harmony temporarily, we also do need to help ourselves and others to change deeply and to develop more wisdom by seeing things at a deeper and deeper level, coming to question some of our fundamental assumptions about ourselves and others. But we should just understand that every person, so we may need to change our worldview. We may need to change, well, no, we do need to change our worldview. We do need to dig and excavate and sort of and question and reimagine what's our fundamental worldview. But what we can say is that everyone's opinion is arising from the combination of their worldview and their wish to be happy and free from suffering. You take these two things, and you can explain everybody's behaviors, opinions, thoughts, and so forth. Their fundamental worldview, what they see, what they believe, and so forth, and then combine that with their wish to be happy, and then that just explains their behavior. So, for example, if you believe that government is inefficient and taxes are costs that you should not be burdened with, then your actions will be, or your beliefs, your worldview will guide you to wish to be happy by reducing your taxes, for example. If you believe that, just as one example. So what we're doing when we're learning to cherish others, we're actually changing our worldview. We're actually changing our worldview, because our fundamental worldview right now is that we are the center of the world. From a practical point of view, we're the most important thing in the world. And then our family and friends and company and a few other things are in there in that sphere, but not other people's family, not other people's friends, not other people's companies, not other people's countries, and so forth. And it is, at the end of the day, all kind of coming back to us, right? It's like we and our family and our things and so forth. These things have a relevance and importance in direct proportion to how close they are to us. And so when we're changing the view to cherish others and cherish all others, not just a few people, gradually, start with a few people, but then gradually build it up. We're changing our worldview. And by changing our worldview, then we'll gradually see that to be happy, we need to primarily focus on cherishing others and reducing our self-cherishing. So, okay, why don't we take a couple of minutes just to let that settle in, with some final meditation practice. So in this final meditation, we just think, this natural view of cherishing ourselves, it leads to my own anxiety. I'm always worried about what people will think of me, whether I have enough, worried that we may have to experience pain and so forth. So our self-cherishing causes this endless worries and can often lead us to act and speak and think in ways that harm others and damage harmony. The opposite mind is learning to cherish others, and so we can make a decision to practice cherishing others in all of our interactions, training our mind in seeing others as precious, valuable. And just hold this determination. And we can end with a vision that through the force of this practice today, we have sowed seeds in our mind. We have created pathways in our brain that if we follow them and exercise them, can lead to a completely different world, a world in which others are precious and valuable. We naturally see others as precious and valuable. We will truly live in a much wealthier world. And then we can open our eyes and rise from our meditation.